Welcome, everyone, to this edition of Stories for Healing. As you know by now, this is something we're doing every weekday, bringing stories of healing from around the world to the world. What started at the end of October as a little effort to try and cast a little lightness into the darkness of all the division and antipathy and just plain stress that we were feeling has really turned into something quite marvelous. We now have really so many storytellers saying, "Can I please tell?" And so many listeners. We're getting about 1,000 people a day watching this, which is really quite remarkable. It tells me that we're doing something right. And as storytellers, we know that the right thing to do in these kinds of times is to tell stories, and to tell stories of healing and reconciliation, growth. And it's particularly wonderful to be able to bring stories that are unfamiliar to us and open up new ideas and new ways of looking at the world. So today I'm very pleased that we have a special guest, Shreedevi Sunil, who's coming to us from Mumbai. Please tell us a story.
Thank you, Jim. So I'm going to start this session with a story that's very close to my heart, because it was one of the first stories that made me discover that stories can actually transform you and change you. And I saw that in a story. So here we go. A long time ago, in a little town in India, there was a young man. Well, he was tall and he was dark and he was handsome and he had all the eyes of the young women on him. But not too many wanted to marry him. You see, he was what they call a bit of a dimwit. Now, in that same kingdom, there was the chieftain, and he had this most gorgeous daughter. And when she, in India, as we used to say, came of age, he decided to sit her down and tell her, "Well, my dear, it's time for you to get married. Maybe I can find you a groom, a bridegroom." So she said, "Well, Papa, I'll get married, of course, yes, but by my terms." Well, you see, he had just one daughter, so he didn't want to say no. He said, "Yes, of course. And what are these terms of yours?" And she said, "Well, very simply, I would like to challenge him by asking him a few questions. And if he can answer them, I will marry him." And so the word was put out that the chieftain's daughter was ready to get married, and the men and the suitors were brought in from different parts of the town, from other towns and different parts of the kingdom. But each of them came, and when they entered and they were subjected to those questions, they really didn't have the right answer for them. And so they were shown the door and they were out. And soon this was not just one or two or tens and twenties of men. These now were counting into hundreds. And the father was getting tired, and he said, "I'm not sure where my daughter is going with this." Now the men of the town were also getting kind of frustrated, and they thought that this young woman was perhaps a bit too arrogant, and this was really infuriating them. How can none of the men in the town or the towns nearby have an answer for her strange question? And so one day, a group of men who were walking down, the woods outside the town, they saw this man. You remember I told you about him, the very handsome, tall, dark man. Yes. Well, he was sitting up on a tree, and he was chopping the branch of the tree. And he was chopping the branch on which he was sitting. And so the men looked up at him and they said, "Hey, do you know what you're doing?" And he said, "Of course I know, I'm chopping the branch downtown." And they said, when one of the men said, "Shh, can you come down, young man? We have something to tell you." And the man said, "Now, when I'm chopping the branch." "Yes, let that wait. Come on down. We have something to tell you." For they put two and two together, and they knew what kind of a man he was, and they had a trick up their sleeve. So they told him, "Do you know that the chieftain's daughter wants to get married?" "Aha, does she now? Did she tell you something about me?" asked the young man. "Well, not quite, but you see, she has these questions, and she says any man who can answer those questions, she will marry." Ah, well, I can answer any question. Come on, let's go. Take me there. And so these group of men, they took that young, tall, dark, and handsome man to the chieftain's house. And they said, you wait here. We'll go inside. So they went inside and they met the chieftain and they said, sir, sire, we have the perfect match for your daughter. There's just one small thing. He will only answer in sign, and your daughter should only ask questions in sign. The chieftain said, oh, that's a bit of a, I need to ask my daughter. And so he quickly dashed and asked his daughter, and she said, interesting. Challenge accepted. And so she stood there, and he came, and he stood right in front of her, and she said, well, you see, she already liked him because he was tall, dark, and handsome. That kind of, takes the edge off a little bit. And then she looked at him and she said, okay, here's my first question. And she showed him one finger. And he looked at her and he said, And she was surprised. She said, aha, very good. And then she looked at him and she said, now. And he said, And she said, very good. Father, Papa, this is the man I will marry. He is perfect for me. He just answered my questions correctly. And she was thrilled. The man was overjoyed for he was going to marry the chieftain's daughter. Ah, that meant beauty, brains, and loads of money. He wouldn't have to cut wood for a long time to come. Now his friends watched this and they said, what, how did he do that? What? So they took him outside and they said, brother, what is it that she asked you and what did you answer? Ah, brother, well, brother, the young man said, very simple. She said, I will poke you in one eye, and I said, I'll poke you in two. She said, I'll slap you tight, and I said, I'll punch you right back. And they said, that's it? That was the question? And he said, well, that's it. It was so simple and easy. Oh, these are things between husband and wives, and you don't understand this. You should have that, to understand and give the right answer like I did. And he was proud. On the other side, of course, the father was curious, and he went and asked his daughter, what exactly did you ask him? And she said, well, father, I told him that the universe has but one God. And he said, but no, both the male and the female together make the divine power of the universe. And I was impressed. Really now? And what was the second question? Oh, Father, I told him there are 5 elements in this world. And he told me the 5 elements together make this world. I loved his answer. What a brilliant man he is. I'm going to be very happy with him. And so the date was set. And the two of them were married. And there was music, there was dance, the food, the feast that was laid out. Oh, they were rejoicing. They were so happy. And then the time came when the newlyweds were alone. And within the next few hours, the bride realized what a gross mistake she had made by marrying this fool. And she said, dear, I could not possibly be married to you for a minute longer than this. I want you to get up right now. The man looked at this wife of his and he said, but you're not even giving me a chance. Oh, I cannot give you a chance. A man who cannot speak about literature and art and music and dance. Oh, I cannot be married to you. I would like you to leave right now. And so, as the sun set, the young man left his house, his new house. He left his wife behind and he walked off. Now, he had a choice of walking back into the same town that he had lived for all his life, or he had the choice of walking the other way. He chose to walk the other way. You see, the shame of having been kicked out by his wife was not something he was willing to put up with. He might not be someone who knows about art and literature and music and dance, but he sure was a nice person. And he was fairly heartbroken by what had just happened. And so he started walking. Now, you see, back in the time in India, when you walked down, long journeys and you walked as a traveler and you came to a temple or a place of worship, they would often give you space or place to sleep at night and rest. And so this young man, as he traveled, away from his town, it was night. He came to this temple. He entered the temple, and there was the priest. He asked the priest, would you be kind enough to let me rest here tonight? And the priest welcomed him, gave him a little bit of water and something to eat, and asked him to rest. The next day morning, the young man woke up and he spoke to the priest, and the priest gave him errand jobs to do in the temple. And so the man did. He helped the priest in the temple, and the priest let him sleep there and gave him 3 meals a day and water to drink. And soon this became the way of life for this young man. A few months passed, and this man was so tired that when he fell asleep, he was in deep slumber. Well, in the night, he had a dream. In the dream, there was this vision of a woman, of an old woman, who looked at him and said, young man, what do you think you're doing with your life? Well, I don't know. I'm not really doing much, he said. Exactly, said the woman. You need to do something with your life. You're wasting it away. You're young and you have energy and you have intelligence. What do you think you're doing? You need to fix your life, she said. Well, he said to her in his dream, of course, that I don't know how. And he told her what had happened to him. And she said, well, here's what you can do. For beginners, you need to start writing. Maybe pen down your thoughts. That will give you some clarity. And he said, well, I don't know how to write. Never written much before. Ah, come on, I'm sure you can write a little bit. Start with 2 words, a sentence, a couple of sentences, and before you know it, you will be writing. Be persistent, don't forget. Well, the man woke up. He thought about this dream, and he went back to sleep. He said, this is not going to work. The next day morning, though, he woke up. He did his errand jobs around the temple, and he sat down with a pen and a paper, and he started to write. He just wrote a few words, and the next day a few more, and the next day a few more. And before long, his words grew into long sentences and paragraphs and pages of writing. He wrote about the people who came and the people who left. He wrote about everything that he saw around him. Now you see, in that temple, there was this very tall, big, large peepal tree. And often in the afternoons and early evenings, he would sit there writing. The people in the town grew curious about this man, so they often came and they asked him, what are you writing? We see you all the time and you're writing something. And he said, it's just a few words, perhaps a story, maybe a verse or two. And they said, why don't you read it to us? And he did. And he did. He read his stories to them, and they enjoyed and regaled in those stories, and they loved it. And soon the people grew in number, and they came from towns that were nearby and far, and they listened to him. Now, what do you know? Word spread quickly, and the word reached his wife. And she said, I would love to listen to this person. I must go. And she told her father, she got dressed, and she reached this town. She reached this temple. And there she stood, and she looked. Sitting under that peepal tree was somebody who looked like her husband. And she said, that couldn't be. Well, he didn't know anything about arts and literature and history. He couldn't speak well. This just cannot be true. But she kept sitting there and watching, and well, it was her husband. And she waited for the people to leave, for it was a bit too much to apologize in front of all the folks. And once the people left, she went up to her husband and she said, Kali, it's me, your wife. Kali looked at her and he said, well, hello. Please have a seat. Sit down. She said, I've heard unbelievable things about your stories and your literature. I would love to listen to you. He said, well, I have you to thank for. She said, you're not angry with me for what I did? And he said, of course not. If it weren't for what happened to me that day, I probably would not have discovered what lay inside me. So I'm thankful to you. I have no anger towards you. That's wonderful. Now you can come home and stay with me, and I will take care of you, and you can write all you want, and I'll be the first to read it. But Kali looked at her and he said, no. He said, no, I can't come back to you, for my first love is my writing. And I need to be out here in the open where I can see the people and I can see the world and I can travel and I can experience it. And then I can write. So I cannot come back to you. And he got up and he left. They say he traveled to many places and they say he wrote some of the best literary works that we have today. This is the story of Kalidas.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. What a great montage of stories there. Thank you, thank you. Um, so the twist, of course, is that she. Well, the twist is obvious that he gets his comeuppance at the end. But somehow he really did benefit from all of this, from his adversity and taking the right attitude to it. That's where now. Where have you first started to tell these stories? How did they come to you?
Um, so Kalidas actually is a story that is part of our he's one of our legends.
Right.
So we've heard snippets of it as we've grown up, but about a couple of years ago, I had a performance for which for World Storytelling Day actually, and the topic was legends, and so I had to pick something that I kind of resonated with,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt that we've all had a time in our life when an experience has caused a diametric shift in how we think and
Mm-hmm.
how we live from there on, or make a change, and then keep that change going. So this story, when I came across it, I really loved the fact that, of course, it's a dream that that makes him think about something. I like the fact that, of course, it's my adaptation where she says that you must be persistent with what you do in order to really succeed in something. So it's something I told my children actually, and I wanted them to kind of explore writing. And I said, maybe I should try it with this story. And it sort of worked with the two of them. And I said, I like it. So I kept it and I keep telling it again and again. So that's how I came across this story. And I realized that stories can actually, we've all, as an educator, which is what I've been, I always thought that stories can teach many things, but for it to cause a change within, that's been a learning for me in the last couple of years, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. And those learnings are usually so unanticipated.
Yes.
That's the great part. Wonderful.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you. And I say to our listeners now, thank you for being here, for participating in this wonderful storytelling. One of the great things about this is that we hear stories that sometimes come speak to us in ways that we don't expect, even when we know what the story is. There can be unexpected learnings there. Another great thing about stories is that as beneficial as they can be to the listener, they're also quite beneficial to us as tellers. They can often heal us as we tell them. So I want to encourage you to share these stories, whether you get them from Facebook or our archive on YouTube. But even more importantly, share stories with each other and tell them with an open heart, and you'll be surprised at what will come and greet you. And so until the next time, I want to thank you for coming to Stories for Healing. Bye-bye.